And welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, and I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. In my last little videos, I have been waxing lyrically and wizardly around the subjects of recovery. I've also made mention, during the course of my epic unloading, telling of my tale, clearance, whatever this is, that life's a roller coaster. Now, my recovery, as I look back on it, was good. I really did. I did well most of the time. But inevitably, as with any human being, we are human despite our wizardly ways, there are going to be dips. Now, I'd thrown myself back into work. I was role-playing, physical work on the forest. All of this was unfolding and starting. Really getting back in the saddle again, back on the bike, all of this time of year. Strangely, my recovery seems to have been split into 3-year gap, a 6-year point, 9-year point. Hardly surprising as a wizard, 3 6s and 9s. It's all 3s. My first physical 3-year clearance, thereabouts, came in December. I'd had a few little moments, I'll be honest, during my recovery, but for the most part, as I said, I was doing well. The teams were happy with my progress, my mental health was good. I had, thankfully, spent years training, meditating, and all of that was keeping me in a good headspace. And there's still a part of all of us that's in the background. I don't know, call it what we like, our shadow. But the part of us that, while the rest of us is going, this is fine, this is a life lesson, and it's all part of my learning. There's a part of me that's sitting on the inside going, yeah, it's right for you, mate, but it fucking hurts. I think we all carry that. I certainly do. That's a part of me that I try not to give voice to, if I'm honest. He's the part that gets to roar at people occasionally and then be put back in his box. But it's an aspect of me, look, it's a part of me that I'm now comfortable with, but it was a part of me that certainly at the time I was concerned about. Any PTSD journey, there is always that fear that that primal part of us explode out. What would happen if we're absolutely cornered? If all the pressure comes on? It's been a concern for me all my life. As a child, if I lost my temper, it made me feel ill. Yeah, no, it won't take you much to work out that most wizards are massive control freaks. In my case, I've learned over the years, lifetimes, that it's about self-control. That's been my journey. Not that I'm struggle, but just maintaining this choice wherever I've been able. I haven't always been able to do it. This is me post-accident talking to you. Believe me, as I look back at times in my life, not quite as chilled as this. But you know that because you heard my story. This roller coaster, as I said, there were a lot of ups in my life, but as it came to December, it's winter time. It was starting to ache. Friends had started to notice that the exuberance that I was living might be on account of the fact that I was still on quite considerable amounts of NHS prescribed painkillers. I had a hefty base of oxycodone. I was using cocodamol, occasionally tramadol and amitriptyline on top of that, basically so that I could numb the pain and get on with being Bobski or Bob out in the woods and just getting on with life. Not many of us do. I didn't think it was a problem. Whoever's there, generally the one with the problem, never really realises it. But things had started to come to a head. I was having some very excited, long conversations into the night again. A few friends were just pointing out, keep an eye on this. Thankfully, I had a brother who would basically just let me float off through the universe, download, while nodding sagely and giving me a sounding board. And for that, brother, thank you. So as I said, I was managing, and I was. I made one critical mistake at this Christmas. I said I'm a volunteer by nature. So I'd had a busy day. I'd volunteered to help out at the PTA school fete. Let's see, go on, queer. But that was the summer fete. We're not going there. I helped out at the school. I enjoy that kind of thing. Bit of support. The school were great for the girls. They were absolutely fantastic through my accident. I wanted to pay a bit back, so I'd probably push myself a bit too hard, take another couple of painkillers. I arrived back home to a slightly stressed good lady, 2 children that desperately needed to be delivered to grandparents so we could go out for our annual curry night. A chance to catch up with the old and the bold, the old EOD team. Tell tall tales, put the worlds to rights, and generally I loved them. I did. For some reason that day it was all getting on top. I'd organised the usual thing on arrival. Everyone's there, where's this, where's that, and it was just, after a busy day, I was quite loaded. We'd walked in, we were going to be drinking. I think I'd taken my painkillers, and the good lady, when I arrived there, grumpy and irritable, went, have you taken your painkillers? Oh, I can't remember, here, give us a beer, bump. Actually, give us another beer, bump. And that pretty much seemed to be my night. Now, normally the curries weren't that kind of an exuberant offloading, but I got into a bit of a combat drinking head. Sadly, the food that night, because there was a huge number of us, was slow to come, so nothing to soak it up. And the usual conversations around a table that I might listen to, and bits may irritate me, but I certainly wouldn't have ever said anything. These are my friends, they've got different views on life. They acknowledge the fact that I look at the life differently, they don't judge me. They just look at me, probably like most people do. What? But there was always that, I don't know, some heated conversations, but there was a good bond there. For some reason that night, good friends irritated me. I'd heard too much of the politics at the time. I was already irritated, starting to go onto Facebook and sounding off with great tribes about this is how to sort out education and this is the state of the world, and basically what was coming out wasn't an angry man. And as I look back on it now, what was coming out was this. I'd survived a near fatal bike accident and had the shit kicked out of me. I was going through all manner of grief as I worked through this. And there are a bunch of morons out there in the world quite literally wrecking it. And I started to get, as many of us had, angry. The thing at the time that fired my, and still does, was Standing Rock. Our past life regressions apart. I have a deep love from my father's side of that culture. To see history repeating itself. I will not go into it here because it will fire me up. Go read the books. Go look at the footage. The fact that I was literally watching history repeating itself, but now from this weird perspective of part of me was there. It fired me up to see, although I wasn't involved, just as an observer, but to see that same cowboys and Indians dynamic that I played as a child before I realised what it was about, playing out again, incenses me still. To watch spiteful children repeating the same errors from our history is just something that I was working through, still am, clearly. Forgive an old wizard's awakening to some of the things he's done in the past and watching it playing out again and irritating me. Now, while I may not have been aware of all that at the time at this level, it was certainly firing me up on a physical level. I started to get a little bit shouty with my mates. They did the usual thing and said, let's go outside for a smoke. Yes, we know that it's all red and blue and there's no difference between politics and they're all bastards and all the usual stuff that pours out of my mouth when I've had far too much to drink and I haven't really got control of it all. I was venting. I got myself really pretty miffed. Well, I think it's fair to say I had an epic sense of humour failure. I was shouting at people, why aren't you awake to the world, to the ecological disasters we face? I was challenging poor people that were just there having a curry. They wanted a quiet night out before Christmas. They had this. Are you awake? Do you know what this costs your planet? Nobody needs that shit, so the boys took me outside. I had a smoke, I calmed a little bit. I shouted at some poor delivery bloke. He was on a push bike. I don't know, I'm not going to mention the name, but one of those boxes on his back. He was just doing his job. You on the push bike, are you awake? Poor bloke, yeah, I'm awake, I'm riding a bike. Now it sounds funny, but that was funny. Because that was the outer bit, but there was a bit of me on the inside that was raging. Absolutely raging, and that's something that I had not really ever experienced in me before the accident. Proper angry. Not, oh, what happens if I get angry? Proper angry. And sort of spotted him and thought, oops. Well, needless to say, the night progressed. I'd got to the stage quite literally by that point that if there was a button that would wipe out 3/4 of humanity that were below a certain level, I'd push it, no matter what the karma was. Friends were clearly concerned, but Bob had lost it, and a little bit of me had. I'd got to that level. Really got to that level. Clearly, something was coming up. Things sort of settled down. I basically got even more pissed. We went round to friends' houses and I demolished a bottle. What left there is not the person having a conversation with you now or has been present since. It was just what we all become when we are just a drunken, shambling mess. I got home and the good lady, quite rightly, pointed out that I had basically made an absolute arse of myself and upset some very good friends, or potentially upset some very good friends. Thankfully, they know me well enough to know that that wasn't me, that clearly something had happened. Obviously it was the accident. They all go through similar situations. We've all had those moments. What better place to do it? You're going to blow your stack, within a group of people who are experts in bomb disposal. Thank you for catching me then. I woke up in the morning, I know that I'd been shouting, I know that I'd shouted at the good lady. In my rage, apparently, even my neighbours knew that I'd been raging and shouting. Had that cleared something? I think it had let a lot out. If I look back on it now, it was certainly the pressure valve popping. So I did the sensible thing, under orders of course from the long-haired colonel indoors. I went on Facebook publicly, apologised. Several friends pointed out that you're carrying PTSD, Bob. You can't lie to yourself anymore, Bob. Okay, guys. So, in many ways, it had served its purpose. That moment of conversation with my brother, his good lady of the time, who knew me from a medical as well as from a family point of view. What were you taking? What did you do? Why were you drinking on top of all of that lot? No wonder it all flew out, you know. Well, I'm Bob and I can drink and I can take drugs. Not these. And please, if there's any warning, go seriously, some of the warnings they put on these packets, they mean it. It was a few hours before I passed out, woke up, mortified, apologised, phoned round in a very real version of what I used to do when I was a teenager. Sorry I woke everyone up. Well, it wasn't sorry I woke everyone up. Sorry I shouted. In good grace, most of them were like, still look at it, and it was. As I said, as much as it really worried me, a lot of them, because it didn't happen again, just like it was mental, not like you, but you seem to have got through you. I didn't do it alone. I was sent to the psychiatrist. I'd been discharged, I'd had all my things, my settlement was coming through. I had a clean mental bill of health. I went, paid my own good money to sit down with my psychiatrist and talked through a few tips. He asked me, well, obviously I explained this one. Told it in the same detail that I just told you, and he sort of pointed out and went, well, and what have you learned? Are you continuing with those tablets? And no, I'm cutting right down on my tablets. Okay, that's good. Will you be drinking copious quantities of whiskey in the future? No, I think I've had my day, that ought to stop. Okay, that's good advice to yourself. If you do feel that, what were you actually shouting about when I explained? Well, they're quite valid things to get shouting about, but maybe some kind of structured approach. Join a few campaign groups. Go out into the woods and shout, but don't let it out on a street corner. Don't let that out in public where it can be attached to somebody. Maybe that would be a better way forward. I was like, well, thank you very much. So what about the shouting? And then he did what all great wizards of the mind do, and said quite often, what we are putting out there, either onto somebody, onto a situation, or onto a thing, is what we need to be hearing ourselves. So while I was out there shouting at the world to wake up, basically the world mirroring back to me that I needed to wake up, moderate my drinking, if not give it up, certainly work out what I was doing with my pain medication, and learning not to keep trying to push myself through every situation, proving to myself that I was some kind of hero, and accept the fact that I had the shit kicked out of me. So that was my physical 3-year boom. In talking to the psychiatrist, I'd had a couple of other little moments. My fear at the time, and which still concerns me at the time, was that we're producing a generation of zombies walking around with little earphones in, shut off from the world. Well, thankfully during lockdown, that sort of happened. I got irritated. I was aware that I carried PTSD in my body. It triggered on the side of a road one day. I was walking the kids, they were younger, to school, I was still on a stick, it was early days. One of the girls was frightened of dogs. It was a dog barking. The dog picked up the fact that I was frightened about my child, and I literally can see this scenario now as it pressure pots up. I became defensive of the children, walking them along the side, and a young lad, bless his cotton, saw us and stepped out to step round us into the road. Glancing up, I saw him, and then him seeing me as I stood up with my children in front, walked to the outside edge of the car, head in the phone, headphones in. I shouted. He didn't turn round. He was still wandering along with what he thought was the side of the car on the path. Poked him with my walking stick. A stupid thing to do. He turned round, got massively reactive, obviously thought he was being attacked by a wizard with a stick. Stood in the middle of the road shouting, what the fuck do you think you're doing? I'm trying to talk him down, keep my kids calm, there's dogs barking. And that taught me a powerful lesson as well. At the time, I was carrying hyper-awareness on the road, and I hadn't really realised it until I got to school with my highly agitated children. Went away and I read a book, How to Control Yourself During PTSD, box breathing, which I've mentioned before. Breaking your breathing pattern to control yourself in stress and trauma. The bugger of it is I didn't actually remember to drop into that breathing pattern when I really needed it. That can often happen. So I did a clever thing in my mind. I empowered my young children to remind me to box breathe. One of their phrases as a child was, box breathe, Daddy. If I was in the car and I could start to boil up, Daddy, window down, box brief. Or they would shout out the window the words that I used to use, much to my amusement, to the annoyance of my family. And they would call passers-by in other cars what I was thinking. These are ways that I worked through my booms and bangs, how to discharge it when I knew that I possibly could put it in the hands of my kids. Why? I won't ever hurt them. Simple as that. And if I'm looking after them, I'm tied to them. It seemed to me to be the best way to deal with my PTSD that has anxiety about loss of children, having nearly died myself. It absolutely helped me deal with that. Whistle, keep them connected, so that they are basically keeping me, the big angry daddy dog, on a lead. And it worked. It worked because I trust myself enough that if they turned around and said, Daddy, go bite them, I certainly wouldn't have done. Probably would have turned around and went, make sure I don't bite your fingers. But it helped me, and I said, and if it helped me, I'll share it. Now, you have to be careful with it. They still try it now, and there's a point you have to go, no, this isn't Daddy losing it, this is Daddy telling you, Daddy, this is Dad giving you what for because your bedroom's a state. But that's the joys of life, of living with PTSD. Can we moderate it? Yeah, a living example of that, for the most part. Apart from recent history, things managed well. So those were my little bangs. They were changes in my life. I stopped drinking in quantity. I still enjoy a beer. Don't be daft, it's me. But do I go out and get raging drunk anymore? No. If I need to go and howl at the moon, do we do that anymore? Well, yeah, but in a safe space. The simple fact is that the reason that I'm sharing all of this now is because of this year's experiences. And in many ways, sharing what I've been through, what's worked, is helping remind me again of where I need to focus in my life. Things that work. So, thank you for listening to some explosive moments in my recovery. Once that little section had gone, my life moved on. That 3 year really did. That was a turning point for me. You've still got this, you know how to work this through. And lots, over time, literally my role playing it through, it's triggered, work it through, it triggered, it's worked it through, allowed me to wind that down until, I suppose for the last 3 years, certainly lockdown would have helped. One strange gift from it. But that gave me time to really actively work through my mind, write my memoirs, sort my head out of what I'd been through and how it had affected me, and to admit to myself and to others of how it had affected me. Clearly, this great untelling is me going through that process. Thank you for listening. Take care, go well, and blessed be. And in my next little videoette, head towards more peaceful and light-filled times.